Hi, my name is Nela Richardson, Chief Economist and Head of the ADP Research Institute. For the past several years, ADP has been surveying workers around the world to understand their experiences at work across a variety of dimensions. This year, we surveyed more than 32,000 workers in 17 countries, including Europe, North America, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. In fact, we surveyed 7,000 workers in the Asia Pacific region in the countries of Singapore, India, China, and in Australia. We learned quite a bit about the global workforce. For one, before the pandemic, workers started out optimistic in this region, especially when it came to their futures and job prospects. Still, there was a sense that people were working a lot, especially in China, and working for free. China and India, people were working for free up to 10 hours a week. And then the pandemic happened and changed everything. In 2021, workers told us that they were shaken, but still seemed optimistic. Two-thirds of the global workforce said that they had been impacted negatively by the pandemic when it came to their professional careers. About 28% of the global workforce told us that they had experienced a job loss or a pay cut or something else in terms of more responsibilities without that bigger promotion. And in the Asia Pacific region, it was really India that felt the brunt of that job loss pain. Almost 4 in 10 Indian workers had lost their jobs or were furloughed or laid off temporarily by an employer. And that compared to just 1 in 5 workers in China. They were also more likely to take a pay cut. Indian workers were twice as likely as Australians to have done so. We found that for the vast majority of the Asia Pacific workers, they were doing something different on the job because of more responsibilities or a different routine, particularly in China and in Singapore. More workers were forced to take on additional responsibility. But there was some good news here. Workers in the Asia Pacific region, especially in India, felt that they were well equipped to adapt to all the changes they were seeing around them. And that led to our next results for 2022. We found that workers were on the move. After the initial shock of the pandemic, workers started around the globe to reevaluate the purpose of work in their lives. They also focus more on their well being and health. And you saw that here in the Asia Pacific region. In fact, Indian workers were the most likely of any country studied to have considered a major career change. Nearly 9 in 10 said so. And that's compared to 75% in Singapore, 68% in Australia, and 61% in China. Flexibility was also important in the region. More than 40% of Australian and workers in Singapore said so. Now, that compared to less than a third of workers in India and China that valued flexibility. But what we found that Chinese did value, in fact, 2 in 5 Chinese workers said so, was enjoyment of a day's work. That was also similar to where what we found in Australia. And about a third said so in Singapore, but only just 1 in 5 workers thought enjoying their work, a day's work was important in India. Now, what really stood out in our findings in the Asia Pacific region is workers' uncompromising feelings towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those feelings were particularly strong in India and China. Workers there said that they were willing to consider leaving their companies if they discovered that there were unfair gender pay gaps or a lack of prioritization on diversity and inclusion. Now, that brings us to this year's results. In 2023, workers shifted their focus. Now, we've seen in all the years of our study, and in every region, that salary is the most important priority for workers. Now, this is really worth highlighting because in the Asia Pacific region, 43% of workers reported that they felt underpaid. But there were other priorities that stood out this year. And namely, there was a refocus from flexibility towards something different. Workers wanted greater career progression and on the job training. Flexibility, though, was still important. Globally, workers with hybrid work arrangements seemed to be the happiest, and those that worked solely on premise were least satisfied. So, putting this all together, we saw that 3 years of the pandemic has disrupted the workplace, lives, and jobs. And worker priorities have shifted dramatically during this time. But those priorities in the Asia Pacific region are starting to settle down. Workers want to be paid fairly, they want career progression, and they want to be part of a dynamic and caring workplace. If employers can put all these things together, they can be ahead of the game when it comes to recruiting and keeping top notch talent. For a deep dive in the Asia Pacific details, data, and insights, please check out our latest People at Work report.